The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our last Best Practice Network webinar of 2010. This is Megan Kelly at VolunteerMatch, and I am very excited to be bringing Courtney King and Margaret Cody from CECP for this webinar. We're going to hold for a few more minutes and make sure everyone gets online, and then we'll get started. Welcome, everyone, to Future Trends in Corporate Giving. We are very fortunate to have Courtney King and Margaret Cody here from CECP to share our final webinar of the year. Before I hand things over to them, I just want to make sure our audience can hear me clearly. So if you could find your question box or your chat box in your right side panel and type in, I can hear you, Megan. I'm very excited to hear Courtney. That'll let me know that audio is connected and we're all seeing the same screen and hearing my voice. Oh, wonderful. Looks like great. Looks like you all can hear me. That's good. So before we get started, I want to remind everyone that they can type in questions in that same sidebar that you just did that we will pose to Courtney King and Margaret Cody from CECP throughout the presentation. We'll have a longer discussion period at the end of the hour, but if you have something urgent that's a question that goes to what they're speaking to, we can pose it in the middle of the presentation. And also, we are having a conversation on Twitter following this BPN. So if you have colleagues that weren't able to join, but they can pose questions over Twitter, have them send those remarks to @VM_solutions or @CECP_community with the hashtag VPN_CECP, and we will get those and respond to them on the call or to you over Twitter. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Courtney King and Margaret Cody from CECP. Courtney comes to us with a vast experience in media and communications. At CECP, she executes the committee's strategy for news media coverage and member communications. She also works on their larger corporate events, including the Board of Boards CEO Conference and the Excellence Awards that are coming up soon. And she's also, one of her other larger goals is working with the International Corporate Philanthropy Day, which is one of CECP's larger events. We are also fortunate to have Margaret Cody, a director at CECP, join us for the call. Margaret leads the organization's long-range strategy and operational planning. She also authors a number of their quantitative and qualitative research reports, including the one we'll be discussing today, which she did with McKinsey and Company. So without further ado, Courtney, can you hear me on the line?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Megan, can you hear me?
Courtney?
Yes, Megan, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I'd love to turn it over to you.
All right, terrific. Well, just to begin, CECP is so grateful for this opportunity to present our research to you and your audience. And Margaret and I are excited to present the research, and we've been excited that this research came out.
Courtney, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. I think you're going in and out. I just want to make sure we can hear you.
Okay. Well, let me know if it goes out again. I can hear you perfectly, so I apologize if there's any difficulties hearing me on this end.
Okay. Nope, you're good so far. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I was just saying that we're excited that this research continues to evolve and grow through the input of all those who read the report. And we're grateful for this opportunity to present the research so that we can address your questions and comments about how this research affects the work that you all do in your positions every day. So to begin, I'd like to provide just some
Courtney, we lost you there again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. What?
There.
Would you like for me to dial in again?
Well, how about we'll keep going. I'm not sure what's going on, but let's give it a try for a little bit further, and then if it happens again, we'll have you dial in again.
Okay, great. Meanwhile, my colleagues will set it up in another office if I need to move in there. So CECP is the only international forum of business CEOs focused on an agenda exclusively focused on corporate philanthropy. If we could just advance to the slide with our CECP mission. Great. CECP has a membership of over 180 CEOs and chairpersons that includes companies from every industry sector. And the companies that are members of CECP represent over 40% of all corporate giving in the United States. We offer our members convenings such as the Board of Boards CEO Conference that Megan mentioned earlier, as well as events for corporate giving professionals such as the Corporate Philanthropy Summit, which occurs in the beginning of June each year. We do peer benchmarking and just released our Giving in Numbers 2010 edition report, which provides an in-depth analysis of industry corporate giving trends. We do have an Excellence Awards program. In fact, the deadline for applications this year is this week if anyone is interested in applying. And we produce research and thought leadership reports, such as the Shaping the Future research, which we're excited to present today. We also are often quoted in the media when it relates to the role of business in society. Today's session we have several goals for. The title of the session is Future Trends in Corporate Giving. And our goals for today are to primarily share the findings from our research conducted by CECP and McKinsey, which showcases an emerging new model of corporate engagement in solving social problems, which we call sustainable value creation. We're going to look from a senior executive and practitioner vantage point at how some corporations are putting theory into practice and creating holistic strategies for impacting social issues. We're going to explore the implications and mechanics of incorporating these ideas, including topics such as how a company chooses the right social issue to address, what are some pitfalls to avoid, and how collaboration plays a role in how companies are going to engage in society in the next decade. Now, Megan shared some of the attendance with me, and I know that many of you are from really interesting organizations across all sectors. So we're going to make sure we talk about how these new models of corporate engagement will affect collaboration across all sectors when business is preparing their programs for the future. If we could advance to the next slide, I'd like to introduce the research report, which is called Shaping the Future, Solving Social Problems Through Business Strategy. Now, this report is available for free download online at corporatephilanthropy.org. If anyone is interested in receiving a hard copy of the report, my email will be at the end of this session, and we would be happy to send one to you. This publication primarily addressed two research questions. The first question was, what will the next decade look like, and what are the implications for corporate involvement in solving social issues? And the second question, how can corporations position themselves now to maximize the profitability and societal impact? Now, those two elements, both the profitability and societal impact, are really key to the whole concept we're discussing here of sustainable value creation. These two questions frame the way the report is organized. The first chapter focuses primarily on kind of setting the stage for the next decade, and the second chapter really focuses on implementation and how companies can achieve the optimal strategies. In order to guide us through answering these questions, we referred to several information sources. First, in-depth interviews with leading corporate CEOs. We spoke with over 15 leading CEOs, and each of them generously gave us about 45 minutes of their time. We also did live event polling at our CEO conferences and drew from the original research conducted by McKinsey economists. Additionally, we interviewed thought leaders from nonprofit, academia, and government communities. And it was exciting to see all of the findings and to be able to synthesize them together into the report that we were able to release earlier this year. Now, there are a few key highlights that we'll be going over in the presentation today, which are covered in the next slide. The first are global forces, and these stem from McKinsey's research on what the global forces are going to be that affect the way business operates in the next 10 years. And these are certainties for the future that business needs to prepare itself for. The second is key uncertainties, and these are things that are uncertain about how the future will play out, primarily whether society's expectations for business increase or decrease, and whether business takes a proactive role or a reactive role in addressing social issues. And then the global forces and the key uncertainties combine to create some scenarios for the future about how these elements could play out. And we provide some key frameworks for how to achieve an optimal scenario. And the key takeaway truly is that business needs to capture the opportunities, that the future is not yet determined, and that there are opportunities for business to shape the way that it plays out, to create a scenario where business thrives and society benefits due to the proactive engagement of business in addressing social issues that are deeply connected to their core business operations. We'll be going into all of these in more depth. CECP embarked on its research collaboration at a time when we were experiencing our 10-year anniversary. We were celebrating 10 years. And we were looking back at our own history of 10 years and ambitiously looking forward another decade. Now, there's a lot that can change in one decade, and we realized this when we looked back at how many things we couldn't expect would have happened if we were to guess 10 years ago. For example, cellular telephone adoption increased from 738 million in 2000 to over 4.6 billion in 2010. No one would have guessed about the Giving Pledge and that Warren Buffett and Bill Gates would lead the world in philanthropy, or that investments in renewable energy technologies would overtake investments in fossil fuel, and also that Greenpeace would partner with multinational corporations. So these are examples of how you cannot predict everything that happens in the future, but by drawing from some established frameworks, we can anticipate some of what is to come and create some productive paths towards creating a successful future. Looking at the next slide, we can delve into these global forces that I have referenced. Together with McKinsey, we were able to share in the report 5 global forces that will affect the way that business operates in the next decade. And these global forces some present opportunities and others present challenges. The global forces include the Great Rebalancing, which is a shift of economic activity from west to east, as well as an aging population, pricing the planet relating to resource scarcity, global grid, which is increasing global connectivity in all operations for business, a market state, which references the larger role for government, and a productivity revolution, which is, again, related to technology and also talent shortages, that even in a climate where there are challenges in the workforce, sometimes the open jobs don't have the talent necessary to fill them. So these all present scenarios for, these present challenges and opportunities for business as they look at their strategies for the next decade. Now, advancing to the next slide, what are the implications for these global forces? They combine to create a fundamentally different operating environment for business. And right now, it looks like that operating environment could include government struggling to find solutions to some of society's largest problems, a decreasing trust in business as business is more reactive to issues as they arise rather than seeking ways to become deeply engaged and proactive in issues, and that businesses are increasingly expected to address social and environmental issues. Now, all of these global forces affect each organization in different ways, and we'd be interested to see how you think that these might affect your organization. So, Megan, if we could go to the polling question now. We had asked our CEOs at our CEO conference over the next 10 years, which of the following is most likely to keep a corporate CEO awake at night? And if we can go to the polling question, I'd like for each of you to answer this question as well. Is it an unpredictable policy landscape, the center of economic activity shifting away from the West, erosion of corporate reputation trust, increasing scarcity of natural resources, or weak social service infrastructure?
Courtney, the poll is in progress, and we're going to collect some responses, and then I'll close it, and you can discuss the results.
Okay, terrific. Okay, so the results are quite interesting. The highest marks went to weak social service infrastructure, unpredictable policy landscape. And now why don't we move to the CEO results from this? At our CEO conference, you'll be interested to see that over 51% of the CEOs were kept awake at night by an unpredictable policy landscape. So this goes to tell that CEOs see uneven policies as a concern to their business as they have operations all over the world. So if they're either inconsistent or changing frequently, that can pose challenges to businesses as they craft their strategies, and signals that business may have to get more involved in creating those regulations as well so that it doesn't create an uneven playing field for them. Other areas that were of concern to CEOs was increasing scarcity of natural resources and weak social service infrastructure. Moving to the next slide, I'd like to touch upon the two uncertainties I had mentioned earlier, which were on the horizontal axis, whether business is reactive or proactive on social issues, and on the vertical axis, whether expectations of business by society are higher and more consistent, or whether they maintain current uneven expectations for corporations. And in combination, this creates four possible scenarios for the future. The top right scenario is sustainable value creation, which is a pro-social state where business engages in issues important to them and creates benefit for both the economy and for social issues. And then on the bottom left is the vicious circle, which is a downward spiral where trust in business decreases and business is reactive and maintains kind of a defensive role rather than being proactively engaged in those. Just to delve slightly deeper into those two scenarios, if we could move to the next slide. The vicious circle, as we mentioned, is arguably where we're headed right now. And in this scenario, business is reluctant to engage in social and environmental issues. Governments and nonprofits struggle to find solutions, and trust in business bottoms out. Environmental and social issues worsen, and the economy can suffer because of increasing pressing social problems in an unpredictable policy landscape. Now, looking at sustainable value creation, which is the best landscape, the best scenario, this involves business developing robust voluntary standards that address social and environmental issues, business building partnerships, if we can, exactly, right there, business building partnerships with governments, nonprofits, and other businesses, and trust in business being high. Business creates innovations that drive improvements in social and environmental issues, and the economy benefits from robust business climate and innovation. So sustainable value creation is the goal, and this is attainable. It's not a utopian dream. It's actually a preferable alternative to the path down which we could be headed. And increasingly, it's in the best interest of business to help solve the world's problems. In many cases, the cost of inaction is actually greater than the cost of acting for business. And another thing to note is the business already has the skills necessary to engage in these social issues. They do it all the time through their core business operations and their product lines or services that they provide. And it is just a shifting mindset to both apply those skills towards not only their business initiatives, but also towards some of these social initiatives that impact their business. Now, if we're headed towards sustainable value creation, what are some of the challenges that might be in the way of us getting there? We asked our CEOs this at our CEO conference in February, and some of the issues, some of the answers that we provided in asking what is the biggest barrier your company faces in preparing to address the oncoming social problems were A, overwhelming complexity of social problems, B, difficulty collaborating or aligning with company stakeholders, C, lacking organizational structure, D, not being able to commit long enough, and E, shareholder pressure preventing from getting too involved. Now we'll do another poll here, and I'd like for you to think about what the CEOs might see as the biggest barrier.
We're collecting our responses, and I want to apologize to the audience. Everyone could hear Courtney fine. It was I that couldn't hear her, but it's going very well at this point.
Terrific. Sometimes it's hard to choose just one. Okay, so 30% thought lacking the organizational structure and capacity. That is a very important part of effectively implementing these, with the close runner-up being overwhelming complexity of social problems, followed by difficulty collaborating. Terrific. If we could move now to our CEO answers, we can discuss what they found. 47% of CEOs found that the overwhelming complexity of social problems presented a barrier. Now, this just goes to tell that addressing complex global challenges takes significant time and innovation. And it's daunting, but companies can adopt their business models to respond in the same way they address business problems. The rewards of this approach are great, but it does require a time frame mindset shift, which often goes beyond quarterly returns that often is a pressure for companies. So the complexity of social problems, you can see how that presents a barrier to CEOs because it requires a shifting in their strategy to a more long-term perspective, and also kind of a patience to be able to collaborate, which was the second barrier that they had, difficulty collaborating or aligning with stakeholders, followed by lacking organizational structure and capacity to engage effectively. So it's important to identify what those barriers are in creating a strategy to go forward. So moving on to the next slide, given these challenges, how can the ideas be incorporated to take us from the bottom left, the vicious circle, to sustainable value creation, which is the top right optimal scenario? We asked our member CEOs the same question. We'll do one more poll here. We asked the CEOs, which of the following actions could you initiate today to best prepare your company to address the social problems that will affect your business in 2020? Embed social engagement into the strategy and organizational structure. Commit to long-term collaborative partnerships with other stakeholders. Promote measurement standards to quantify the business and social impact of engagement. Improve feedback loops on social engagement with consumers, suppliers, and others. Or E, help shape voluntary social engagement standards for corporations. And again, it's always difficult to choose just one, but we did challenge the CEOs to choose just one as the most important action that they could take today towards shifting this strategy to address social problems. And we'll give you a minute to provide your thoughts on this. Interesting. 73% embed social engagement into our strategy and structure, followed by a tie with committing to long-term partnerships, promoting measurement standards to quantify impact. Well, let's share the CEOs actually felt very similar to the way that you did. An overwhelming majority of 77% said that the most effective action they could take today would be to embed social engagement into the strategy and organizational structure. I really think that the fact that your answers were spot on is quite telling. What does it mean to embed social engagement into the strategy and organizational structure? This could involve shifting responsibilities as social engagement and problem solving becomes part of core business operations and involves all employees rather than just specific departments. So that is a large strategy shift for many companies, and exciting to see that so many CEOs see this as a priority. Moving on, we're going to focus on some more CEO perspectives. As I mentioned, one of our key inputs to our research were these in-depth phone interviews that we had with CEOs, which provided some really great insights into the ways that CEOs are thinking about these issues. And we just wanted to share a couple of these quotes with you. Mike Duke, the CEO of Walmart stores, said that in the future, more will be expected from market leaders and globally successful companies, and those companies who are most involved will be most successful, creating an upward spiral. So it's a great example of how a company can achieve sustainable value creation is by this kind of self-reinforcing cycle that he describes. Bill Weldon of Johnson & Johnson spoke about the importance of collaboration, saying, "We all have to contribute to sustainable solutions over time. Not any one group can do it alone. If we do not align ourselves and work in a collective way on these social issues, everybody will be worse off." So while it's important for companies to engage in social issues, it's also important to seek the right collaborations, which we will touch upon in more depth. All of these CEO quotes are also included in the report itself. So moving forward, the report highlights several case studies throughout the report of companies that have begun to successfully implement these strategies into their core business operations. And we wanted to provide you with a few highlights that you can always go into more depth with in the report. But GlaxoSmithKline, for example, incorporates social issues into their business strategy by developing innovative strategies to reduce the cost of medicines that are being sold in the least developed countries. General Mills employs its core competencies by partnering with USAID to improve the capacity of small and medium-sized businesses across sub-Saharan Africa. IBM prepares its employees for leadership through a program called the Corporate Service Corps program. They send teams of their best emerging leaders to perform community-driven economic development projects around the world. And then, in turn, their employees gain some of the leadership skills that they need to excel in their core jobs at IBM. Alcoa sets ambitious goals for environmental and social targets and reports specifically wide targets for ensuring a diverse workforce and reducing environmental footprint. So each of these examples relates to sustainable value creation because they're tied to the core competency and business success and addressing an issue that might get in the way of the company's success in the future. Moving to the next slide, just to provide a couple more examples, I wanted to focus on Walmart, for example. Walmart had faced public criticism of corporate waste and also recognized the increasing scarcity of environmental resources as a challenge to its business in the future. And they decided to commit to being supplied 100% by renewable energy, creating zero waste, and selling products that sustain people in the environment. In choosing to proactively reduce its environmental impact, the company not only realized cost savings but also addressed the demands of its stakeholders and leveraged its core competency, including the purchasing power, size, influence, and efficacy of its supply chain. Western Union, which was a winner of CECP's Excellence Award a couple of years ago, they're one of the leading money transfer companies, and they identified as an important issue to the company migrant rights. And they advocate for migrant rights and have commissioned studies on remittances to examine the power of remittances to promote long-term economic development. And by ensuring that migrants are treated fairly and receiving the training required to advance in their careers, they're investing in the long-term success and financial stability of their clients, as well as building loyalty among customers and employees who are passionate about immigrant rights. One final company example is Nestle. We had Peter Brabeck-Letmott, the chairman of Nestle, as the CEO panelist in our London CEO conference. And he spoke about how Nestle has incorporated a sustainable value creation, actually they call it creating shared value, adopting Michael Porter's phrase, mindset into their articles of association, truly taking a long-term mindset and actually asking their shareholders to approve that Nestle is their mission is to both achieve their business objectives and achieve their social objectives, and that shareholders have the patience to make sure that Nestle takes the steps necessary to achieve both of those objectives in tandem. Some of the initiatives that Nestle takes to create this creating shared value concept is that they will go into communities and support the farming and the whole infrastructure for a sustainable industry, whether that's around milk or cocoa or any other of their inputs, and assisting communities in the economic development around that industry, usually with no requirement that they actually provide to Nestle, but by actually investing in supporting the infrastructure, Nestle also attains business benefits through that, and they're very straightforward about the business benefits that they derive from these social investments that the company makes. All of these examples show that it is critical to choose social and environmental issues that are core to your business strategy to ensure that you both have the legitimacy and skill set to achieve the impact for your company and society. And what you're seeing on the screen now is an illustration that is in the Shaping the Future report, and we call it the issue ripeness map. And again, we have two axes, and this is a framework that's helpful in determining what issue to address. On one axis, you see society's expectations, and this is the perception of the severity of the issue to current or future generations, as well as the perception of a company's capacity to affect the issue. On the other axis is the relevancy to the business. This means whether the issue actually presents an obstacle that might prevent business success in the future. It also relates to the core competency of the business. Is the business credible in this area? And does the business have the expertise and the resources to be able to move the needle and actually create positive momentum around the social issue? And then depending on where those align, a company can kind of assess what kind of a role they might want to take on this issue. If both are low, then perhaps it's not the right social issue for the company to address. However, if both society's expectations and the relevancy to business are very high, the company should seriously consider taking a leading role. Now, what does it mean to take a leading role? The good news is that leading does not always mean going it alone. A company needs to think seriously about whether it makes sense to take a leading role or whether it makes sense to take a more patient approach and find the right partners to create a strategy that will combine both the company's core competencies and expertise of other outside groups. Some of the things to consider about whether a company should act alone is if the company might derive a competitive advantage from being the first mover to get involved, or has an opportunity to play a unique catalytic role, or if there's some urgent need to respond immediately to prevent something negative from affecting the company. However, there are many times where it makes sense to take a collaborative approach on addressing a social issue. Sometimes this can accomplish ends that no one single player can establish alone, particularly if the complexity of the targeted social issue requires broad skills and experience. And if a large constituency of which the company is a member but not the only member benefits from unified action. So this analysis, first of what the right issue is, and then second of whether it makes sense to act alone or to collaborate, is important for a company to go through as they're crafting their strategy towards sustainable value creation. Now, collaboration is not new. It's something that companies have been doing for many years with other nonprofits and with other groups. However, in the next decade, in this sustainable value creation journey, there will be some new elements to this, which includes new partners, new organization structures, and new activities. These are all components that need to go into successful collaborative initiatives, and we'll discuss some of the specific new partners, organization structures, and activities in a moment. But some things to keep in mind is that the partnership must be aligned around the root causes of an issue, that trust among all of the partners is paramount, and that there must be some sort of a safe environment for the partners to come together and align their goals together to see if it is the right structure for addressing the issue. Now, CEOs need to think about where, once they identify an issue, whether it makes sense for them to take the lead on an issue or just take part as one of many actors. And one of the poll questions we asked was, what do you think is the appropriate role of a company in solving a social problem that is important to its business? Now, that last part, that is important to its business, is a key part of the question, so that this question is really targeted to an issue that is important to the future success of a company. And the answer choices are drive the solution, be part of the solution, fund the solution, invest pragmatically, or do not engage. Okay, well, I'm interested to see what you all thought. Okay, 61% be part of the solution, 24% drive the solution, and 4% fund, 12% invest pragmatically. Interesting that fund the solution is so low here, and you'll see a similar trend when we look at the CEO's answers. Only 6% said fund the solution in our CEO sample, and we had 50% saying drive the solution and 42% saying to be part of the solution. Now, this does represent a mindset shift from the past view of corporations as supporting only through providing funds. Corporations are, especially those who are on a journey towards a sustainable value creation model, looking to be more involved in the problem solving themselves rather than just funding others to achieve to solve the problem. So this does not mean that grants or financial support is going away, but it means that companies are really interested in taking an active part in crafting the strategy towards solving these problems. So going towards, we have one other collaboration-related poll question. We asked our CEOs, who is the most important for your company to collaborate with in solving social problems important to your business? Is it companies in your supply chain industry, nonprofits, companies outside my industry supply chain, governments, multilateral institutions, or others? Okay, 56% said nonprofits, followed by 22% for companies in my industry supply chain, and 4% outside, 8% with multilateral, and 10% with government. Terrific. Now let's have a look at what the CEOs thought. So a combined 50% of CEOs said that they would collaborate with companies either inside or outside of their industry supply chain, which we thought was a very interesting findings, that companies saw opportunities to collaborate with other companies both within and outside of their supply chain. And they also saw nonprofits to be continuing as an important partner in solving social issues. Governments, multilateral organizations, and others were rated lower. So this is an indication of some of the shifting partnerships and collaborations that we may see as companies take a more active role in solving social problems. Now moving to the next slide, I was talking before about how partnerships require different organizations to come together with unique assets and unique expertise. Collaboration requires having alignment on goals, incentives for each partner, making them invested, and these non-redundant resources and expertise. So as we saw, nonprofits remain a very important partner for corporations. Some of the assets that nonprofits bring to partnerships with corporations include their staff and volunteers and their service infrastructure, as well as intangible assets such as their expertise, their subject matter credibility, knowledge of community needs and customs, and their deep and long-standing relationships as well. Whereas companies often are able to draw upon cash, products, facilities, technology and logistics, as well as they have some intangible assets. Companies are able to absorb risks and sometimes can conduct pilot projects, whereas government and other areas might not be able to do that. So companies can take those risks, do the pilot projects, and then allow others to scale them up. Companies also have supply chains that they can influence and expertise in a number of different skills, including negotiation, project management, and legal issues. The next slide shows, again, these new collaborative models for innovation, identifying some of the new partners and new elements in these collaborations, which include partners, structures, and activities. Some of the new partners that we may see involved in collaborations towards solving social problems are cross-industry or sub-industry groups, as we saw CEOs are interested in collaborating with other companies, foundations, nonprofits, think tanks, and universities and other convening bodies, including organizations like ourselves who have convenings of bringing together business leaders. The structures might include public-private partnerships, venture capital models, research collaborations, and others. And their activities may include pooling financial resources, as well as co-developing products and services, co-investing in infrastructure, creating or adopting voluntary industry standards, and that speaks back to the CEO's concern about uneven policies, that businesses may become more proactive in creating a landscape that's more even for the benefit of their company as well as the entire industry. Advocate for regulation and policy change, and educating the public and influencing key stakeholders. So actually taking a more public stance on some of these social issues. Now moving to the next slide, the research also presents some of McKinsey has some keys to high-performing partnerships, which we've touched upon, but also are important to keep in mind with any partnership. These include clear mission and objectives, that everyone is aligned around the root causes of an issue. Motivated partners, each of the partners has to have a specific reason that they make sense to spend their time and resources. Meaningful activities, that expectations and roles for each partner are clearly defined. Effective governance, there needs to be an appropriate body of partners and structure to solve the problems, and defined organizational structure to get decision-making through, as well as performance management, a clear goal-setting strategy, and check-ins to make sure that progress is being achieved. And on the converse side, if progress is not being achieved, perhaps reassess, and see if there might be modifications that might be successful. So moving forward to the next slide, this is kind of taking a wider view at the evolution of corporate engagement. Corporate philanthropy began with what some call checkbook philanthropy, where it was less strategic and companies provided purely financial support to organizations that may not have been directly tied to the core competencies of the business. Moving more towards a proactive approach, which includes signature programs and social issues that resonate with the company's business. Many times these proactive approaches resonate with the company's stakeholders. Those include the shareholders, the employees, and others. And then moving towards a more integrative approach, choosing issues that tie to the competitive advantage of the company, providing both business benefits to the company as well as societal progress. Now, what CECP advocates for is a portfolio approach, that a company, it's important to have a reactive, the ability to be reactive, for example, in disaster situations. Matching gift programs with employees often can be considered reactive, as well as having programs that tie to what your stakeholders care about. Many times these are the signature programs. But this kind of third category of sustainable value creation, where the business goals of the company are being directly benefited through a thoughtful examination of what social issues might negatively affect the company in the future, and a strategy towards moving the needle on those issues, both benefiting business and society, is the way many companies are envisioning their programs going forward. And just moving to the next slide, this is one of the ways that companies can move from a vicious circle scenario towards a sustainable value creation scenario in the future and take advantage of the great opportunities to assess the global forces and take a proactive approach. I want to make sure we have time for questions. It's 1:45 here on the East Coast. I guess 10:45 for those of you on the West Coast. We could just move to the final slide perhaps, which has the report download link and my contact information. And both myself and Margaret, who is the director of CECP and wrote the report as well, are available to take your questions. So
thank you so much, Courtney. Maybe to kick it off, I'd love to hear from Margaret what some of the challenges were with preparing how to gather this information and choosing what's a feature.
Well, I think, and thank you to everyone for spending some of your morning and afternoon with us. I think some of the ideas introduced on Courtney's earliest slides about how do you confront something as kind of daunting as a decade in terms of predicting where different trends that we're starting to see surface now will end up. Because 10 years, in some senses, isn't that long. Certainly, companies make investments and commitments to communities, especially in certain industries, that can last for 100 years or more. So 10 years is in some ways short. But given how much the world can change in 10 years with the advent of a new technology or a major kind of headline-grabbing pandemic or social issue or something like that, it can take us all in a radically different direction. So really trying to hone in on kind of the 5 forces that we thought would really affect the landscape over the next 10 years was important for us, and that's why those CEO interviews about what's keeping you up at night were so important. We certainly had the benefit of McKinsey's crackerjack team of economists to help us look at some trends, but also kind of checking that against what CEOs who are on the front lines of these global trends are kind of most concerned about. So really that the mixture of having kind of grounded economic research in some CEO interviews, as well as, and you'll see this in the acknowledgement section, some really leading thinkers from the academic and government and nonprofit communities as well, and really trying to say, okay, well, we know we won't be 100% right in understanding the future, but let's take the best minds and try to see if we can at least narrow the view a little bit.
Great, thank you. Another question from the audience was, how do you see employee volunteerism playing into philanthropy?
Employees are a very important constituency for companies as they craft any sort of a strategy, and we've seen that in past years. We've actually asked the question about which kind of stakeholder group is most important to companies, and employees always rank very highly. Pro bono service is slightly different than volunteerism, where employees are actually doing what their core job function is in the assistance of a nonprofit organization. We've seen in our Giving a Number study that continues to rise. As these collaborations come together with new models and companies really do some navel-gazing about what their core expertise is that they can bring to the table, I think that their employees will play an increasing role because they have so much expertise on every front, including communications, logistics, and human resources, legal issues, and those expertise can be applied towards social issues as well. So employee volunteerism, I think, will be very important because employees are the core of a company, and on taking it one step further, the trend towards increased pro bono service also, so that employees aren't just, kind of giving a helping hand on a paid time off, but actually using something that they've, undertaken significant training for and making a difference using those skills also.
And this is Margaret. I'll just chime in for 1 second. I thought it was really neat how the audience kind of considered some of the obstacles to taking action, and one of them was lacking the organizational structure to really mobilize. And I think it's important for us and for all of those who have a focus on volunteering to think about, does our company or organization have the organizational structure to allow us to tap this unique asset that business has, and if it doesn't, what types of shifts or moves or who might we try to influence to try to snap some of those organizational dashed lines or reporting structures or to kind of elevate the credibility of those charged with this important resource of mobilizing employees to get them the access they need to advocate for the policies and structures that will allow more employees to become involved.
Great.
These are fantastic questions. Please keep them coming.
We have a handful here. The next one I'll follow up. It's kind of in the same line, but how do you see cause marketing in the future, in the bigger picture and trends that you've been describing?
One of the points that I think Courtney was making as we looked at that progression of corporate philanthropy, the reactive, proactive, integrated, at the end was the concept of a portfolio and how cause marketing might fit into the portfolio. I mean, one thing that we love to see is companies using kind of as many people and as many budgets as possible to try to move the needle on social issues. So if you have marketing staff and expertise and budgets on social issues, in addition to perhaps your corporate foundation, in addition to kind of the corporate side and your employee volunteers, from our point of view, the more the better. So I do think it's interesting, though. We're always at the edge of our seats waiting for the Edelman Good Purpose study to come out, and that was released, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago. And, Carol Cohn in the press release for that said, cause marketing is dead, and she kind of landed in that same bucket where CECP is in terms of thinking about, well, how can this all be integrated? So I don't think she literally meant that cause marketing was dead, but just that the need to kind of pull cause marketing kind of into the fold of being as integrated as all of these other efforts is going to be really crucial.
Great. The next question we had was, how do you identify the issues to consider for your own company? And specifically, do you suggest a way of filling out the ripeness issues grid, which I'll go back to that slide right now so everyone can see it.
Sure. The issue ripeness map. A good place to start if you're not sure, the issue ripeness map is really a tool for assessing a specific issue and thinking about how important it is to society and how relevant it is to your business. If you're not at that stage yet of being able to even have one issue to address, the right place to start may even be with the global forces and thinking about, okay, these are going to be the changes over the next decade. There's going to be talent shortages. Are we going to have the people with the right skill set for the jobs that we need to fill? Resource scarcity. Is there some fundamental area of our supply chain that may be endangered in the future? One example that I didn't use, but what we cite often is McDonald's. They saw that their fish supply in the future was endangered, and they partnered with some environmental agencies to create a sustainable fish supply because they recognized that this was a threat to their future business. So perhaps spending some time with each of the global forces and thinking about what might present a threat to the company, and then moving to the issue ripeness map and seeing if it's something that society has high expectations for, and again assessing that relevance to business. And the most important thing is that both are present, that there is a strong relevancy to the business and high societal expectations. But Margaret, do you have anything to add?
I would say, one thing, and if we have any representatives from nonprofit organizations on the line, I'll give you a piece of advice, and then you can let me know how good or bad you think this advice is. But I think one thing that's important is that I think it's becoming less about where a company's been and more about where a company's going. And one of the ways that as a nonprofit organization, if you're trying to kind of plug into this issue ripeness for a company and kind of look at some of the different models for collaboration and who you might work with to be part of the solution is turning your attention not just to the grants the company has given in the past, but go ahead and click over to that kind of investor relations section of somebody's website and look at where the company's trying to go. Because this is all about a company's future competitive advantage and what obstacles they see in their way. And a lot of that can be captured in a company's financial annual report or its filings with the SEC, where is this company intending to grow? Where have they had trouble in the past? And how can I kind of connect the social issues that I see in my community or I see in my region to what kind of business problems this company is trying to solve? Because that's what we're really talking about, is the intersection between economic interests and social interests, and a lot of that there might be good kind of breadcrumbs and clues to in looking at the company's broader business objectives and linking those back to societal problems.
Thank you, Margaret. Another question, what percentage of corporate giving is still dispersed by companies versus corporate foundations or other giving mechanisms?
That's a very timely question because we're very proud to have recently released the latest edition of our Giving in Numbers report. And just as the Shaping the Future report is a free download from CECP's website, the Giving in Numbers report is a free download as well, and that's the most recent look at the trends. We will say that there is a lot of variability by industry in terms of how heavily an organization relies on its foundation as compared to its corporate cash and non-cash. I mean, certainly manufacturing companies tend to give more non-cash, which then downplays the role of their foundation. By contrast, service companies, it's about, and I'm kind of just flipping through our report quickly to find the statistic for you, about, I think, like 25% is corporate cash, maybe 40% foundation cash, and then a small amount, like 10 to 12% non-cash. I'm kind of remembering. I'm remembering from the report, but if you want to know the exact numbers, I encourage you to download Giving in Numbers, which you'll find a link to right on our homepage.
That's wonderful.
Oh, let me just chime in really quickly and just say, I think the actual statistics surprise people quite a bit. I've talked to people and they assume that most giving that a company does comes out of its foundation, and a lot of it is non-cash, particularly for manufacturers, and that's not coming out of the foundation, that's coming out of the corporate side. And then there are quite substantial corporate budgets, and so I think it's quite natural for people to automatically kind of apply to the foundation, and the most rigorous kind of data you can find on what a company has done is available for the foundation and not from the corporate side. That's just kind of a much more kind of transparent aspect of corporate giving. But I will say that a sizable percentage is coming from the corporate side and in the form of non-cash.
So the next question, we shift to economics. Economics are already shifting the tax burden from state and local government onto public and private foundations. Is this one of those global forces you cited, or is it strictly a domestic situation that we are just going to have to deal with since it will likely never go away? Tackle that one.
I do think it ties a little bit into the force of the market state that we were describing earlier, but it also plays into what Courtney said is our unfortunate drifting toward the vicious circle, which has got to do with kind of the society's expectations for business and how much kind of tax and regulation starts to get shifted from one sector to the next. I will say we're just now embarking on a project at CECP to try to better understand the variability in kind of tax law around the globe, so it shouldn't be too much longer before we start to have more concrete answers on that. But one of the things we're also going to try to understand, in addition to the variability, is the volatility. You know, how often do these things change? And a lot of that has to do with incoming and outcoming kind of governments. You know, meaning, one party controls it one time and the next party controls it the next time, and sometimes there can be a lot of volatility, which makes it honestly very, very hard for NGOs and companies to plan.
Thank you. You are both incredibly informed, and this is a great dialogue going on. We have a ton of questions, and I will send those to our speakers if we can't get to them. I think we're going to take one more, and then we'll wrap it up. What are the future trends internationally, and how do we address national and international trends together so that we act as one company?
One thing that we tried to do with
Margaret and Courtney, did you hear the last question?
We sure did. Hopefully you can hear us. One thing that we tried to do with this research, although it's true that a significant portion of CECP's membership is companies headquartered in the U.S., the vast majority of those companies do have global operations and a large percentage of their workforce and employees abroad. And we did also include, as Courtney was saying, you know, examples of companies that are headquartered abroad like Nestle and GlaxoSmithKline. I think that one of the things that you see as one of the 5 forces that we outlined in the report is the interconnectedness of kind of society and markets, and then there was certainly no more poignant lesson in that than the recent economic downturn, where home prices in Las Vegas are suddenly causing a bankruptcy of, I can't even remember right now, was it Finland or something? Where I'm embarrassed that I'm choosing the wrong Northern European country, but that interconnectedness, I think, is been profoundly demonstrated to us. So I wonder if one of the things that we're going to see is a complete blurring of what we consider to be kind of locally or globally applicable. Certainly as we're dealing with companies kind of in the largest revenue band. In terms of how we address kind of national and international trends together, I think one of the slides that I really love from what Courtney presented is that rigorous accounting that each organization can do as to their unique assets. Where is your subject matter expertise? Where are you able to mobilize community leaders? Where do you have kind of products and kind of infrastructure expertise that you can leverage? So in terms of trying to decide kind of how we can all be part of the solution, I think doing a really honest self-assessment about what do I know better than anyone else, and how can I plug that into being part of the solution would be a first start. I know that's a very kind of high-level answer, but I do think that in the last couple of years there's been an interesting blurring across sectors. You have nonprofits doing lending, which is traditionally the focus of a bank, and you have companies who are advancing theories of change, which is typically the domain of nonprofits, and there's been kind of an interesting blurring there, but I think and I think that can create a lot of positive results, but at the same time it's also really critical for people to be really honest about what they know better than anyone else, and if everybody does that, we can start to put the puzzle pieces together on some solutions, I think.
Great. Well, Megan, thank you so much,
Margaret.
Thank you for the opportunity
to wrap it up. I wanted to see if Courtney and Margaret had some final words, and we'll end our webinar.
Sure. Well, I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to present the research, and as I mentioned at the beginning, the report is available on our website, which is corporatephilanthropy.org, and we'll do our best to address any questions that are sent to Megan over email, and if anyone would like a hard copy of the report, let us know that as well. So we hope that this will be useful research as you all, approach your important missions.
And the only last thought from me, Margaret, is that whenever CECP publishes a report, we're really always hoping that it's the start of a conversation as opposed to the end of a conversation, and really love to hear from people who see opportunities for us to improve or fill any gaps that you've noticed. So certainly any and all reactions to our research or ideas that it inspires with you, we'd love to hear from you. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Courtney. And for those on the line, do stay informed for future VPNs of 2011 from VolunteerMatch. You can also gather further information. There'll be a recap on our blog of today's webinar, and sign up for the newsletter. It features a lot of great research like what we've heard today and other news in the space. Thank you, everyone.